raise power, they'll be paid. And that's why we'll be able to raise power to that level. So whether you're talking about infrastructure, you're talking about, investing in people, you're talking about, security, talking about ease of doing business, or even diversifying the economy. When we came here, we came in at a time when the oil price was almost, at 50. 2016, we sold oil for about $30, $35. Yet we've done so much more with so much less, within these few years. And for the first time, we've been able to truly diversify the economy. We got out of recession, not because the price of oil was up, but through agriculture and mining. And today we are proud to say that from importing 644,000 metric tons of rice every year from Thailand, we cut down that today to 24,000 metric tons of rice. We've created an extra 6 million rice farmers. Our borrowers, Anchor Borrowers Program, which stretches over 24 states, today produces about 4 million metric tons of rice. And we hope that in the next 2 years, we'll be self-sufficient in rice. I think I can stop here and then, thank you.
May I ask Enelamah, okay, let's have your own take of this, and then we can dive deep into the issue discussion.
Thank you. Just to add to what my colleagues have said, going back to the observations you made on Paul Collier's sort of checklist, I think the first thing to say, talking about democracy, which is where you landed, I think most people accept, all well-meaning people accept that Nigeria is doing quite well in terms of democracy and building democratic institutions. And an important dimension of that democracy and building democratic institutions is to ensure that we're having the right conversation. And I was reflecting on this. I think one of the things that people take for granted, but actually the president and this government has done, is to, make sure that the country is having the right conversation. What do I mean by that? If you look at the 3-point agenda that the president set on security, on fighting corruption and good governance, and on the economy, before he came, I'm sure you'll recall when the discussion was about whether stealing and corruption were different. Today, everybody accepts that we need to talk about corruption and we need to deal with it. So even the opposition is having the same conversation. And so I think the starting point is that under this democracy, we are having the right conversation. Point number one. The other point is that there is also, as my colleagues have shown and said, and from the statistics, there is progress being made. One really has to be either inattentive or perhaps in denial to say there's been no movement on security from where we were, or to say that the issue on corruption and the attention is getting, that is the same thing it has always been, or in terms of the economy. So I think on all those broad parameters, there is progress being made. Having said that, it takes more than one administration to build a country. So one of the most important things is to continue on this trajectory and to continue to have these conversations and to ensure that those institutions are being built and being sustained and that the progress we have made continues and that we're not sliding back. Let me use just one example. Before we came on the enabling environment, something I'm very passionate about and this government is very passionate about, we were sliding for 10 years, sliding backwards, even though there's some rhetoric around it. But I think the world accepts that we are now serious about creating the right enabling environment for prosperity. Because you need, the singular most important responsibility of government in my view is to create that environment. That includes security, peace and security. It includes the soft and hard infrastructure and all the other institutions that people need to make it easier to operate in the country. And I think that journey is well on its way now.
I'll stay with you for a moment and ask, let's now dive deep into this and take you up on the nation's industrialization policy.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Well,
I was going to say that the way I look at it and how some other people have looked at it as where we are today, there should be some kind of an entrepreneurial economy. Are you thinking along this line?
Thank you, John. I think the first thing to say is that even before we came, we had recognized as a country that industrialization was important. Indeed, Africa accepts as part of its Agenda 2063 that industrialization is the way to go. And we actually had a plan on paper, the Nigeria Industrial Revolution Plan. And that plan also had the right sort of, should I say, principles in terms of recognizing that you needed the right ecosystem to industrialize a country, but it had not been implemented. So what we have done is to focus on what it would take to implement it. And that plan recognizes that the number one thing you have to do is to create the enabling environment for industrialization, which means infrastructure. And that is why, the president and the government and the country as a whole, we are now, I would say, very serious about rebuilding our infrastructure. Hard infrastructure, soft infrastructure, hard infrastructure in terms of railway, in terms of power, in terms of roads, and this. The thing about these things is that, like, it's not talking about them, it's doing it. And as you know, doing it takes money and it takes effort. And I think everybody accepts that now we're serious about infrastructure. Before now, if you look at the amount of expenditure on it, clearly there was, there was a big gap. Now, the other side of infrastructure is the importance of the partnership between the people who actually are, the private sector, who are the people you want to encourage to be in industry, and the role of government, which is an enabling role, like I said. And in furtherance of that partnership, we have started something called the Nigeria Industrial Policy and Competitiveness Advisory Council, which is a partnership between the stakeholders in industrialization on industry. The private sector players, the leading members of the government, and then other stakeholders. And what we have seen has been going on for about 18 months now, is that we actually, first of all, we've identified the areas, the critical issues that we need to industrialize the country. Things like critical infrastructure, areas like financing, areas like trade policy and market access, and finally policy. And the interesting thing is that all the relevant ministers are there. For instance, the Minister of Finance was working on financing, I remember, with the private sector, and they came up with ways to provide financing to industrialists. So I think the process has started. Let me also say that in addition to that, the thing about industrialization is that you need the right environment for it, like I said earlier. So we are looking at these special economic zones. If you look at the countries that have industrialized, many of them, instead of trying to industrialize across the entire country in one go, launch specific centers of excellence where industrialization can take place, or where industry could take place. And we're doing that. And that's why you'll find that, like, we're building new world-class industrial parks. And so I think we're well on our way. The final thing I would say, talking about industrialization, you also have to play to your advantage. So industrialization is about comparative advantage. So if you look at agriculture and agro-processing and that entire value chain, and you look at petrochemicals, and you look at some of the other sectors like light manufacturing, that will take care, that will use our labor. I think in all those areas we've identified what we need to do, and we're working with the private sector to do it. And to then land where you started, which is on entrepreneurial energy, I think that's really the strength of Nigeria. Nigerians don't lack for entrepreneurial energy. Nobody comes to this country and leaves having any shadow of doubt about entrepreneurial energy. The real thing that is needed is to create the enabling environment for people, to put that energy to work, and that's exactly what we're doing.
Mr. Finance,